Senator from Arizona.
I'd like to speak about an issue that I and most Americans, I believe, find extremely troubling, and one that I've been seeking to have properly addressed for many years now, namely the outright corruption and blatant abuse of the American taxpayer that's been taking place at the hands of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac for decades. Since they were placed in conservatorship in 2008, the two government-sponsored enterprises, GSEs, i.e., supported by the taxpayers, have soaked the American taxpayer for nearly $170 billion in bailouts. And this morning, the Associated Press reported that Freddie Mac has now requested an additional $6 billion to continue their, so far, in my view, failed efforts. I quote from the Associated Press, government-controlled mortgage giant Freddie Mac has requested $6 billion in additional aid after posting a wider loss in the third quarter. Freddie Mac said Thursday it cost $6 billion in the July-September quarter. That compares with a loss of $4 billion in the same quarter of 2010. The government rescued McCAIN Virginia-based Freddie Mac and sibling company Fannie Mae in September 2008 after massive losses on risky mortgages threatened to topple them. Since then, a federal regulator has controlled their financial decisions. Taxpayers have spent about $169 billion to rescue Fannie and Freddie, the most expensive bailout of the 2008 financial crisis. The government estimates it will cost at least $51 billion more, to support the companies through 2014, and as much as $142 billion in the most extreme case. Freddie and Washington-based Fannie own or guarantee about half of all U.S. mortgages, or nearly 31 million home loans worth more than $5 trillion. Along with other federal agencies, they back nearly 90% of new mortgages over the past year. The two mortgage giants buy home loans from banks and other lenders and package them into bonds, So, here we are. They've lost $140 billion. We've spent, they've spent $169 billion. Now they're asking for $6 billion more. And so, what do we find out? That Fannie and Freddie now will dole out big bonuses. I am not making this up. The Federal Housing Finance Agency, the government regulator for Fannie and Freddie, approved $12.79 million in bonus pay after 10 executives from the two government-sponsored corporations last year met modest performance targets tied to modifying mortgages in jeopardy of foreclosure. The executives got the bonuses about 2 years after the federal giants received nearly $170 billion in taxpayers' bailout, and despite pledges by FHFA, the office tasked with keeping the solvent, that it would adjust the level of CEO-level pay after critics slammed huge compensation packages paid out to former Fannie Mae CEO Franklin Raines and others. And I might add that these huge bonuses and packages that were given to Mr. Johnson, Mr. Raines, and many others, which there is clear evidence of, was done by cooking the books. Not a one of them has been held accountable in any way, shape, or form. Securities and Exchange Commission documents show that Ed Haldeman, who announced last week that he's stepping down as Freddie Mac's CEO, received a base salary of $900,000 last year and yet took home an additional $2.3 million in bonus pay. Records show other Fannie and Freddie executives got similar Wall Street-style compensation packages. Fannie Mae CEO Michael Williams, for example, got $2.37 million in performance bonuses. That's after the taxpayers paid $160 billion. That's where they're on the hook for another $6 billion, and God knows how much more. And so we are giving these individuals $900,000 a year salary, millions of dollars in bonus pay. And who in the world is the Federal Housing Finance Agency to award these bonuses? I mean, it's hard. FHFA Acting Director Edward DeMarco, and I must admit to my colleagues, I had not heard of Mr. DeMarco, told Congress last year that the managers who were at the helm of the mortgage companies during the market collapse were dismissed, but also argued that generous pay helps lure experienced, qualified executives able to manage upward of $5 trillion in mortgage holdings. Whatever happened to asking patriotic Americans to come and serve and help homeowners out of this crisis? Whatever happened to patriotic Americans who would serve and help the nearly half of the homeowners in my state of Arizona whose mortgages are underwater? DeMarco told lawmakers he's concerned that suggestions to apply a federal pay system to non-federal employees could put the companies in jeopardy of mismanagement. Could put the companies in jeopardy of mismanagement and result in another taxpayer bailout. They just asked for $6 billion more. He said the compensation packages at Fannie and Freddie are part of the plan to return them to solvency while reducing costs to the taxpayers. A March report by FHFA, obviously ignored by Mr. DeMarco, their inspector general, said the agency lacks key controls necessary to monitor executive compensation, nor has it developed written procedures for evaluating these packages. In other words, the beat goes on. Business as usual, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. It's unconscionable. It's been proven time and time again that Fannie and Freddie Mac are synonymous with mismanagement, waste, outright corruption, and fraud, and their federal regulator has the audacity to approve $12 million in executive bonuses to people who make $900,000 per year. This body should be ashamed if we let this happen, especially in these economic times. Every day, more and more Americans are losing their job and their homes, and we're allowing these people to take home annual salaries of $900,000 and bonuses of millions of dollars. All the while, they ask the taxpayers for $6 billion more today. You know, it's come to my attention that some of my colleagues are writing letters, calling for committee hearings on this issue. Letters are fine. Hearings are fine. Hearings are great. They're not the answer. The answer is for us to stop it from happening, and we can do that with an amendment on the pending appropriations bill. And I'll be offering an amendment, and I hope all of my colleagues would join in. Let me just bring the attention of my colleagues a book called Reckless Endangerment. It's written by Gretchen Morgenson and Joshua Rosner. And the title of it is How Outside Ambition, Greed, and Corruption Led to Economic Armageddon. So we're talking about pay and bonuses. And I read from the book. Because bonuses at Fannie Mae were largely based on per-share earnings growth, it was paramount to keep profits escalating to guarantee bonus payments. And in 1998, top Fannie officials had begun manipulating the company's results by dipping into various profit cookie jars to produce the level of income necessary to generate bonus payments to top management. Federal investigators later found that you could predict what Fannie's earnings per share would be at year end almost to the penny if you knew the maximum earnings per share bonus payout target set by the management at the beginning of each year. Between 1998 and 2002, actual earnings and the bonus target differed only by a fraction of a cent, the investigators found. Investigators uncovered documents from 1998 detailing the tactics used by Leanne Spencer, a finance official at Fannie, to make the company's $2.48 cent per share bonus target. That year, Fannie Mae earned $2.4764 per share. Mid-November, memo to her superiors, Spencer forecast the company was on track to earn $2.4744 per share, just shy of what was needed to generate maximum bonus payments to executives. Look, this story goes on in this book. It goes on and on. How the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac executives intentionally ripped off the American people, describing profits in a way that was totally false, getting tens of millions in bonuses. This is a government-sponsored enterprise. Mr. Johnson bailed out with $100 million or so of taxpayers' of bonuses. In 1999, Johnson joined Goldman's board, stepping into a highly lucrative position that offered rich investment opportunities overseen by the firm and opened doors for Johnson around the world. In 2000, the Goldman board position paid Johnson $50,000, not counting stock awards. With brokerage firms like Goldman Sachs flourished from the fees generated by underwriting securities issued by Fannie and Freddie, with fees totaling $100 million a year. And guess who came on Fannie's board? Mr. Johnson. Johnson was still on the board in 2010 when the Securities and Exchange Commission sued the investment bank for securities fraud related to its sale of a dubious mortgage security. By that time, Johnson was earning almost $500,000 for his work on the Goldman board. The accounting fraud at Fannie went undiscovered until 2005, when an investigation by OFHEO unearthed it. In a voluminous, intensely detailed 2006 report, OFHEO noted that if Fannie Mae had used appropriate accounting methods in 1998, the company's performance would have generated no executive bonuses at all. A lawsuit filed by the Securities and Exchange Commission in 2006 said the company's 1998 results were intentionally manipulated to trigger management bonuses. Although a highly kept secret at the time, Johnson, this is Mr. James Johnson, Johnson's bonus for 1998 was $1.9 million, investigators determined. It later emerged that the company had made inaccurate disclosures when it said Johnson owned a total of almost $7 million in 1998. In actuality, his total compensation that year was like $21 million, OFHEO said, referring to an internal Fannie Mae analysis it had turned up. So one of the great scams in American history is going on, and the people responsible for it have never been held responsible. Have never been held responsible. I refer to my colleagues taking a look at this book, and I recommend taking blood pressure medicine before you read it. Now, here we are, business as usual in Washington. The approval rating of Congress now down to 9%. As I've said continuously, we're down to paid staffers and blood relatives. Why are they not happy with us? Why haven't we solved the housing crisis in America? Why is it that half the homes in Arizona are still underwater, worth less than their mortgage is? But while the financial institutions on Wall Street have doing just fine with record profits, and Fannie and Freddie continue to act as if they did nothing wrong. And to add insult to injury, after a third quarter loss of $6 billion, they're going to get millions of dollars in bonuses. Mr. President, I may be a bit of an idealist, but I'll bet you that there's some patriotic, talented Americans that would be willing to serve on Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac without being paid $900,000 a year and millions of dollars in bonuses. I really believe that. I really believe that. And yes, people are sitting in around the country, and yes, I don't agree with a lot of their agenda. But when they read of things like this, their anger is justified. Their anger they have every reason to be justified. Already, $170 billion in bailouts. This morning, an additional $6 billion. And yet, the American taxpayer is told that they're making progress? And who has been held responsible at these organizations, at these government-sponsored enterprises that were responsible for this? To my knowledge, Mr. President, no one. So it seems to me the least we can do is cancel these bonuses, make sure it doesn't happen, and maybe ask for some qualified, experienced, talented Americans to come in and take over this agency. And the first guy that I think ought to go is the guy that approved of these mortgages, who I understand that approved of these payouts, Mr. Edward J. DeMarco. Mr. President, I yield the floor.